they had kind of different intranets, and they wanted different business units in the main navigation, in the global navigation. But if you have multiple global navigations, you can only show one normally. So that's kind of an interesting topic as well. How can we manage to bring in kind of multiple global navigations into one navigation? So these are the 3 or the 4 challenges that I want to cover today. So HIFA, the first one we want to talk about. So first, briefly about HIFA. HIFA is one of the world's largest providers of transport solutions, and more specifically, they are very, very front-running in tipping cylinders. So what are tipping cylinders, you ask? Well, I have a couple of pictures which I will show in a minute. But what is relevant in this case is that HIFA is present in more than 110 countries. They have 30 fully owned subsidiaries and 12 production facilities in different countries. So they're quite large company. And that's also why they required more levels of navigation than the 4 levels of navigation that the regular global navigation offers. So tipping cylinders, what do they look like? Here we have a couple of implementations of tipping cylinders. So the tipping cylinders are kind of the hydraulic cylinders that are used to topple containers that work in garbage vans, that work in pickup constructions, etc. So this is about HIFA. So their challenge, the 5th and 6th level navigation, and of course centrally managed per site, because it's easy to add a quick links web part to a page. That's even possible on a communication site, and then add some links in that web part. But then you have a problem. Okay, if I want to put that same web part on another page, I have to reconfigure it. I have to add the links there as well. And that makes it a little bit cumbersome. So the real challenge here was, okay, we want to have that 5th and 6th level of navigation, but we want to centrally manage that. And the standard global navigation in Valo provides 4 levels. The Portiva logo in this case is level 1. That brings you back to the root site. Then you have the top level navigation, in this case about us, internal services, what's new, etc. So that's the 2nd level. Below that, you can see that we have expanded the mega menu here. We can go to company presentation, financial information, organization, etc. And below that, we have the 4th level of navigation, the board of directors, the management team, people directory, virtual teams, etc. Okay, so they have the 4 levels of navigation, but they wanted more. So we figured, okay, quick launch to the rescue, because there is a quick launch in SharePoint, as you might know. And the quick launch is a navigation option on the side of your team sites, which you can centrally manage. Because if you update something in the quick launch, that works, that goes through the entire site. Everywhere where you have the quick launch, you will see that same navigation. But the problem is, you don't have a quick launch option in communication sites. The quick launch only works in team sites. But you do have the capability of the quick launch to manage the quick launch in the site settings. If you go to site settings of a communication site, you can still see the option there for the quick launch to manage it and to update your links there. So we had a challenge there. Here we have a communication site, and as you can see there on the site, we don't have a quick launch there. Which we do have in team sites. So we were wondering, okay, how can we solve this? That's where the Valo extensibility framework came in, because Valo, together with their intranet product, they provide an extensibility framework. And the extensibility framework lets you bind into the global navigation, the footer, or even some of the providers of services. And that's very important in this case, we are able to add custom data sources that we can then use in the universal web part, another part of the Valo product. And the Valo universal web part is, well, the name already says it, it's a universal web part which uses handlebar JS templates to customize the display experience. So what we figured, how we solve this in this case is, okay, we want to use the quick launch option because that provides us a way to centrally manage the 5th and 6th level of navigation, but we can't show the quick launch in a regular way into a communication site. So we decided to use the Valo extensibility framework, and we created a data source which hooks up to the quick launch, to the navigational items in the quick launch, because we can retrieve those through the SharePoint APIs. So we created a data source, and it's fairly easy to do because Valo already provides in their documentation a good description how you can handle, how you can add a custom data source. It's just a couple of lines of code, and then you have your data source, and we could retrieve the items from the quick launch. And then we use the Valo universal web part to bring these items into a display mode. And the way that looks like is here on the left side, we can see the quick launch. So if you go to site settings and you go to quick launch, that's the middle part, you can see there the option to add a new heading, to change the order, to add new navigational links. So here you can see that I can add 2 levels of navigation. Funny thing is, as soon as you go to site settings, you will see the quick launch on the left-hand side of the site settings as well. So it doesn't work in the pages of a communication site, but it does work in the site settings of a communication site. So even if you don't want to go to the quick launch settings in site settings, you can still use the left-hand navigation to drag and drop links there, to add links, to modify the order, etc. You can literally pick up a link, drop it somewhere else, make it indent, go to a second level, put it somewhere else, etc. And then on the right-hand side, you can see an example, in this case for Haifa, how we leverage the Valo universal web part with just some CSS. We hook up to the custom data source, just some CSS, and handlebar JavaScript code base does the rest for us. So here we added a web part which we can then put on any page. We can even put it in a page template so that it automatically appears in every page that it gets created into that site, and it retrieves the links from the site settings, so it's centrally managed in a site, and it shows a nice way of a 5th and 6th level of navigation. So that's the first case. Any questions about this one before we move on to the next? No, all right. Let's move on to the next one, which is Port of Amsterdam. So we already talked briefly about Port of Amsterdam. Who are they? Well, they are the Port of Amsterdam. Hey, that makes sense, right? But the good thing to realize is that they're not just a port for large transport vessels. Because Rotterdam, for example, or Hamburg, or other bigger harbors or ports in Europe, usually they're big because of large container ships coming in, large oil ships, gas transport, etc. But it's all about transport vessels. But Amsterdam is quite large and quite big in people vessels as well. A lot of large cruise boats come in, but also within Amsterdam, as you might know, we have a lot of canals in Amsterdam, and we have a large lake kind of centrally located into Amsterdam. And there's a lot of boats there. So the Port Authority of Amsterdam also takes care of all the boats there. So it's more than just transport vessels. And also they kind of bring economic services to hook up maybe foreign parties who want to invest in Amsterdam, or who want to see if they can maybe bring their business to Amsterdam, and they can kind of facilitate and connect parties together to see if they can have some meaning, if they can work together. So here's a nice picture of the Port of Amsterdam. All right, so the challenge that they had, they wanted a news subscription model. So they wanted for their users, for their employees, to kind of subscribe to certain news topics. because let's briefly talk about the news creation process in Valo first. In Valo, you can personalize news provisioning by providing tags. And the most use cases that we see is that this is based on tags in the user profile, right? So somewhere in an HR system, or maybe directly in Azure Active Directory, or even in an on-prem Active Directory, which is then synced to Azure Active Directory, that's where profile properties come from. So that's where, from a company perspective, you set up which department someone belongs to, which country someone works in, which business unit someone belongs to, etc. And sometimes you offer people to bring in their own profile properties as well. Maybe you want some projects they worked on, or some hobbies that they have, or some topics that they're interested in. But you would have to go to the profile page to update that there. And the cool thing about Valo is when you create a news item, you can already use different metadata options connected to maybe a user profile property to target your news. So here we have tags, we have a business area, and we have an office location. These are three kinds of metadata that we then look up into the user profile properties, and based on the user profile property and based on the tag that was selected for the news item, a news item gets shown for a specific person or not. And in this case, for the Port of Amsterdam, we wanted the business area and the office location to be fixed. So you choose a marketing department, or the port department, or you're in headquarters, or you're in finance, or whatever, and they have multiple office locations. And that's the two kind of data that come from the user profile that people cannot change. This comes from HR systems. But the tags is something else, because we wanted people to subscribe and to choose their own tags. And based on the tags that they chose, they will get to see a news item or not, because the news editor also selects the tags that they want to bring this news item to. And we can then use, again, the Valo web parts to filter. So in this case, we have the Valo tags, and we can use a filter token to kind of filter out and only show the news items that are relevant for that particular user accessing the intranet. So in this case, it is possible to use, for example, user.sps interests, which is a standard field in the user profile property, and we can then put the tags in there. So how did we do that? We created a profile pane web part. So there's a button on the intranet which users can click, and then the profile pane opens. And in the profile pane, and it is in Dutch, I'm sorry, because the Port of Amsterdam only has the employees, their intranet is in Dutch, but I will walk through this. So the second option that you see there is interessant news, which means interesting news. So this is where people can select their own tags that they want to subscribe to. So here they can select from a fixed set of topics. Okay, in this case, I'm interested in all news items about commercial items, about infrastructure and environment, about all international related news items, etc. So here you can select the topics that you are interested in. And then we store these topics in the user profile property. So the users don't have to go to their user profile page to update the topics there. They can just from the homepage of the intranet click a button and update their subscription topics right there. So the interesting thing is, as soon as we built that, we got a couple of more requests from the customer. Hey, now that we have this pane here, can we maybe add some functionality there? So the first one is they have they had multiple business units, but there was one specific business unit for operation that required a different set of tiles with quick launch links. So they asked us, can we maybe show, can we let people select the tiles that they want to show on the homepage? So we have two options here. So users can select the algemeen, which means general, the general tiles, or the DHN operational tiles. And that's also something we then store in the user profile of that person, and we then filter. We use the tabs in the tabs web part in Valo, and we show either one or the other to the particular user. So that was very convenient for them as well. And then there came another question. So if we already have something, if we can already store things in the user profile of a user, can we maybe add some additional info? Because we would really like people to update their user profile more often, because there are nice and interesting profile properties that people never update. For example, there is a standard user profile property that tells you about what you are knowledgeable on. What do you know? What is your area of expertise? Or what are you currently working on? These are interesting topics because we can also leverage those in people cards, or you can search for people, hey, who is now working on this and this project, and it searches for these profile properties as well. But nobody ever updates those properties because people don't want to go to their user profile and click edit and update this. So that's not something that you would do a lot. But now we have this pane. So would it be possible to have people update their status right inside this pane? Yes, of course. So we decided to add that as well. And what you see there, werkt aan, that means I'm working on. So that's a project that you're working on, for example. And weet veel van, that means I know a lot about. So that's your expertise that you can then you just type in here. It will be updated in your user profile, and then people can search for this in the people search. All right, thank you, Knut, for mentioning that you can ask questions. Yes, so any questions about this particular case or how we solve this? Okay, then let's move on. Well, I take a sip of the water. All right, fourth case I want to talk about, Stadion. So Stadion, as I said, is a large housing corporation, and they basically own 1 in every 7 homes in the city of The Hague. So they rent more than 36,000 homes, and they also rent out other objects for shops, business, parking, storage, etc. And I really like their mission. They want to make everybody feel at home with a 100% score of all their tenants and residents in this year. I really like that because there's no 90% or 95%. No, the aim is 100% make people feel at home. So that's really nice. And well, they do not just only rent houses, but of course they build houses as well. They're a large construction, or they don't construct them themselves, but they're a large supplier of building new houses as well. Their challenge, a department co-workers overview. That's what they wanted. Right, so they have departmental pages in their intranet, and that makes sense, I guess. But that's something we see a lot in intranets. So intranets, of course, on the one hand, you have news, and that's a really important topic in the intranet. But on the other hand, the internet is also used to bring information from different organizations or from different departments, to the organization. So you might have an HR page or even an HR site where you provide, I don't know, maybe expense forms or a way to check how many holiday days you still have, and maybe request a holiday, or maybe some documentation about all the benefits that the company offers to all the employees, or information about, I don't know, which different salary levels exist within the organization, etc. So there's a lot of content, usually kind of static content, which you want to bring, which nicely suits in the internet, which you want to bring to your organization. So these departmental pages That's a common thing that we see a lot, and that's something that's easily done within the Valo product. But now they wanted to have an overview of all the coworkers on that page. And first we figured, okay, what about the standard SharePoint people web part? Well, that's a little bit cumbersome. At first they liked it, and they figured, okay, that's nice, that looks nice. And they started typing in the first one and the second employee and the third coworker. And then they realized, wait, we also have departments with 30 people, or a department with 80 people in there. And so first of all, someone has to type in all these 80 people. Okay, that's something you can do. But what if someone leaves the company, or what if someone maybe moves from one business area to another business area? And what about those 80 people showing up inside that web part? That will be a long list of people inside that web part. So we kind of quickly found out, okay, this is maybe not the way to tackle this problem. So what we did is we built our own people web parts. And in the left and in the middle, you can see the properties of the web part, and on the right, you will see the result of the web part. So first, we have a couple of common properties. So we can give the web part a title, obviously, and then an interesting one, we can filter. And why is that interesting? Because if we provide a search filter, the department itself doesn't have to manually update this list of people anymore. Now it suddenly relies on the information coming from the Office 365 user profile directory. So basically from Azure Active Directory. So this was also interesting because we implemented this. This is what we talked about. Would this be a good way? Yeah, that would be a good way. Okay, so we implemented this and we ran this in a test site in their production environment. And we found out that there was quite some people inside Active Directory who didn't have the right department set there yet. And that's something I guess that we see a lot, right? Pollution of Azure Active Directory. So if you want to go for this solution, you have to keep in mind, okay, this means that we have to make sure that at least the field that we want to filter on cannot be polluted, because otherwise, yeah, this option will still not work. But they quickly changed this. It was also on the roadmap anyway, so it was pushed a little bit to the front. And they now realize that even if people move from one business area to another, that it's really important to also update the user profile properties, updated in the HR systems, but also updated in Active Directory. But if they then have all these properties updated, then this is a really nice way, because you don't have to manually update this this web part anymore. We also have a couple of sorting options, of course, and we later on decided to add a search bar because for bigger departments, we found out, okay, if we have 80 people that we want to show, first of all, the list of 80 people is not really handy to show. It's not the best way of showing the people, because you have to scroll down and the page just becomes very long. And if you don't have enough content on the other side of the page, you have a large white space and just people on the side of the page running there. So we wanted to add a search option so that you could search for people, and we wanted to add a page option so that we could show pagination on that web part. And we have a couple of options there as well. So how many items would you like to show per page? How many clickable pages would you like to show? In this case, it's 1. So you can see that I can only click on page 2. If I would make the amount of clickable pages 2, for example, I would see already page 2 and 3 in the navigational part of the web part. We have the option to go directly to the first page or to go directly to the last page. They're optional. Next page and previous page buttons also optional, and the page numbers to show also optional. So this is, I think, a nice way to automatically show people that belong to a department and make sure that it doesn't eat up too much space into a page. Any questions here? All right, then we move to the last reference case already, which is Refresco. And Refresco is Europe's largest manufacturer of soft drinks and fruit juices. And as I said, they're one of the largest in the world, I think even. And they provide bottling for almost any brand that you know. They do a lot of bottling. They have some. They do it for international A brands, for some national brands. They have some of their own brands as well. They export to various markets, and basically they produce more than 30 million liters. What they call themselves the world's favorite drinks per day, which is quite a lot, right? So it's a bottling company, and they have many offices all around the world, many places in the world where they manufacture, where they bottle, etc. And this is one of their bottling lines. So this is what this looks like. Their challenge was that users should be able to switch between business units from the global navigation. So basically, they had multiple global navigations because they had one global navigation for the global intranet, but then they wanted to have different intranets, different intranet entry points for the different business units because they are quite large and the business units kind of work independently from each other. So they figured, okay, we want these business units to have their own kind of intranet. And with that came the wish to have, for these business units to have their own global navigation. But the problem is we can only show one global navigation at a time. That's for SharePoint, but that's also the case for Valo when you implement Valo. So we were thinking, okay, we need a way to show multiple global navigations at a time. And that is possible because the extensibility framework that I already briefly talked about earlier gives us a way to hook up into the global nav area and maybe show there a different navigation as well. But then you have the question, how can we make sure that this performs? Because if we need to look up every time the global nav and a different navigation, and we need to make REST calls, web service calls every time, this will maybe not perform very well. So we decided to have a look at the Valo extensibility model again, because we knew that we could bind something into the global navigation. And in this case, we didn't have to use custom data sources. We didn't have to use the universal web part. We just wanted to hook into the global navigation and want to make sure that we would get some, we could get the navigational items from another global nav into that same navigation. And what is also relevant to know in this case is that Valo uses the term store for global navigation. So if you want to set up a global navigation for a Valo Intranet environment, you kind of set up a term store, a term set, and that's where you manage all your navigational items. So we had multiple term sets for the different navigations, for the different global navigations. So we had to find a way to retrieve the navigation from a different term set, and then also to make sure that that performs. And that's also very interesting about the Valo extensibility framework, because they not only provide us a way to bring something into their global navigation, so they give us, on the one hand, a way to bring something else into the global navigation. So we found a way to bring our own navigation or a different global navigation into the existing global navigation. Second option that they give us with the extensibility framework is we can use the providers and services that Valo already uses themselves. We can use them, we can use these same services to retrieve data. And that's what's convenient in this case, because Valo uses their own service provider to retrieve the items from a term set and bring those into the global navigation. So we could leverage, we could use that same service to fetch the navigational items from another term set and bring those into the navigation. So that was benefit number 2 from the extensibility framework. And then the third benefit that we found that we could use for this solution was that Valo uses local storage, local browser storage to cache navigational items. And we could use the same local storage that that Valo already uses in their solution. We could use and leverage the same navigational or the same local storage to bring our navigational items into there as well, which makes it perform well. So these are 3 really cool features that we use to bring into the solutions. And I wanted to provide this diagram because how does this work? Okay, the first thing we do when you enter a page, we have a very small snippet which checks where are you right now? Are you in the global hub or are you in one of the business unit hubs? So are you in a global hub? Yes. Okay, that means that I have to check which business unit I belong to, and I want to get the business unit navigational items from local storage. But if the local storage is not available, okay, then I have to create a call, a web service call, retrieve the business unit navigation from that other term set that I just talked about, store that into the local storage, and then render the menu. But if the local storage already exists, because maybe this person already visited the internet, I don't know, 1 hour ago, or the previous day, or 15 minutes ago, the items are already in the navigation, in the local storage. So we only need to check if they didn't expire, if they're still relevant, and we can then retrieve the items from the local storage. And that makes it really, really, really quick. So this performs really well. And of course, this also works the other way around. So if we're not on the global level, but if we are on a business unit level, okay, then I have to fetch the global navigation. So I have to go retrieve that term set from the global navigation. And again, same procedure, check if local storage is available. If it already is available in local storage, let's show it right away, very quickly. If not, okay, let's retrieve it and then put it in local storage. So at least we know that the next time this person visits the page, it will be very, very quick. And this is what in the end it looks like. This was the first iteration. In the meantime, we are already working on bringing this more actually into the navigation, into the global navigation. So here we have kind of separated the two. And we're trying to make this more of a whole, but this is currently implemented at the customer and it works quite well. As you can see, we have the global navigation on the left hand, we have the About Us, the Knowledge Hub, Teamwork, etc. But we have the business unit navigation there as well. And when you hover over there with your mouse, you will get another mega menu with all the navigational items from the business unit that you belong to. All right, that was the 4th customer reference case. Thanks, Gogan, for the compliment about the diagram. Are there any other questions that people would like to know about these cases? We still have quite some time left for questions, if there are any questions. If not, I think I just gave you back maybe 15 minutes of your agenda time.
Yeah, thank you, Maarten. Looks like there's no questions.
No, okay. Let me put up my Twitter handle here. If you have any questions, do reach out on Twitter and use the hashtag #AskValoFest because then other people can also monitor the hashtag and see questions and see the conversation that we have there. Gogan, you have a question. You mentioned that people didn't fill in their properties. Yeah, how can we gently force them to do so? Yeah, excellent question. That's also something that we build for other customers. It's a profile checker web part, and I think, I'm not sure, but within Valo, you're looking into this as well. I'm not entirely sure, but at least we built something for that, and we are already using that at different customers. So it's a profile checker web part, and it's just a hidden web part on the homepage of the intranet, and in the profile property web part, in the web part properties, we define which profile properties we find important. Which profile properties should be filled by a user. And then someone lands on the homepage, the web part checks if for this particular user all the profile properties are filled. If yes, then nothing happens. People can just visit. If no, then we get a nice light box, a nice pane popping up. Hey, you didn't fill out all your profile properties. We really think that in our company, in our organization, these profile properties are really important. So please fill out these properties. So that's one way of doing it. A second way is there are products out there which help you in keeping an updated Azure Active Directory and user profile properties. I think Hyperfish is one of those products that does this quite well. So there are options there. But yes, I agree, Gogan. It's quite important. And somehow people normally don't go to their profile page to update this by themselves. So it is something. It's a question we get more often. All right. Well, thanks everybody then for your attention. I hope I gave some nice ideas, some inspiration. Like I said, if you have any questions later on, do reach out. Feel free to contact me. And thank you all for being here. And I wish you all a great day. And Knut, Gokam, good luck with the rest of Valo Fest. Awesome job, guys.
Thank you so much, Maarten, and thank you for the really enjoyable session and all the cool extensions to Valo that you guys have built. So thank you for sharing all of your insights.
More than welcome.
All right, thank you, everyone. So the next session in this room now is actually by the one and only Gökhan. So he will talk about get ready to become a Microsoft Teams rockstar. So stay tuned and see you around. And thank you, Maarten, for being a speaker for us. You did amazing. Thank you again.